Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation discussion on female music. I hope you find it interesting and you get something valuable out of it. So I'll be discussing female music based on two separate readings. The first one being Sex of Lady Gaga by Matthew Deflem, and the second one being The Price of Rebellion, Gender Boundaries in the Death Metal Scene by Sonia Vasan. So I hope that you find it enjoyable. Okay, so the first paper I'm looking at is The Sex of Lady Gaga. Deflem in his paper reflects and analyses how Lady Gaga rejects and challenges the female pop stereotypes and refuses to conform to preconceived ideas of how a female pop star should look and act. So if we look at this in the context of Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, and even Madonna, all of these female pop stars have used sex, gender and sexuality in a way that we would expect them to. They've used it in a way that's enticing and alluring, and that in turn has become part of their identity. What Lady Gaga does is quite different, and she uses her sexuality and gender as more of a rebellion. She turns the concept of sexy and feminine on its head, and what's resulted is an enormous amount of fame for her. Okay, and here we have Gaga in her infamous meat dress, which to me is making a real statement about the fact that she's not just another piece of meat. She's not just another female pop star. So in Deflem's paper, he looks a bit at what is so fascinating and why some of the reasons are that Gaga's statements and interpretation about sexuality, gender, and her own sex are so appealing, and how this has resulted in her having such a cult status. So I think it's important to note here, Gaga's not ashamed of being female, but she just rather aggressively questions or forces us to question what it means to be female. What I think is interesting is that Madonna back in the 80s was quite sort of aggressive with her sexuality, but in a different way. Madonna was more about traditional sex appeal, whereas Gaga is not. She's quite different. Gaga forces people to question the ideologies of sex, femininity, and also what it is to be female. So she's quite different in that respect to Madonna. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit here about how Gaga works to use her sexuality and works to make statements about gender and being sexy or challenging those preconceived ideas in her lyrics and her actions. So, as Deflem notes in his paper, she does allude at times to being bisexual, and I agree with Deflem in the fact that this is probably more a gesture towards her gay fans to, reach out and identify with them. What's also interesting is that Gaga, while she wears tight, revealing clothes, it's done in a way that is not meant to be sexually appealing. It's almost a way of sort of throwing back in society's face what it means to be sexy. Is this sexy? Does this make you think of sex? It makes us question all of those preconceived ideas we have about sex and sexuality and what's sexy. Another really interesting thing in terms of Gaga is that she's given her fans, which she affectionately calls her little monsters, a place in society where they can be free of judgment of what may traditionally be considered attractive. She does that by her actions, her lyrics, giving them the confidence to be themselves. I think that's a huge part of Gaga's appeal, and is what has seen her become so popular. Okay, as de Flem refers to in his paper, while she's not actively seeking to be a feminist, she certainly portrays some of the characteristics that we might traditionally associate with feminism. One particular example that he uses is the song Bad Romance, where the video film clip to that song, Gaga is captured and sold into slavery and ends up killing her capturer. So it's work like this that allows Gaga to come across as being a strong woman who won't allow herself to be manipulated by men. So she might not have set out to be a feminist, but certainly she's doing her bit to empower young female and even gay male fans to stand up for themselves. So I think, in conclusion, to this particular piece, Gaga has used sex, gender and sexuality in a really interesting way. She's used it to fuel her fame, which has seen her become a mass cultural icon. She's empowered those who may not have in the past been confident about themselves, and she's done this by really challenging preconceived ideas of femininity and more specifically what a female pop star should look like and how a female pop star should act. So it's quite interesting upon reflection to divulge a little bit deeper into the workings of Gaga. Okay, moving on to the second paper about the death metal scene and women fans and women artists within this scene, which has traditionally been a male-dominated scene, which is pretty sexist and pretty derogatory towards women. So the author of the particular paper, Sonia Vassan, she's analysing the attitudes and the behaviours of the female fans and the artists involved in the scene through the lens of a social exchange framework. In terms of the social exchange framework, she's looking at it in terms of the social and moral trade-offs and the costs that are associated by these women in being part of this subculture, the subculture of death metal. Okay, so as Vassan explores in her paper, women in the death metal scene, so female fans, female artists, willingly accept sexism and inequality just to be part of the subculture of death metal. So they willingly trade off on some of their morals and beliefs just purely for the fact that they can then be accepted. So quite an interesting reflection, and one that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the following slide. So in her research, Vassan conducted a series of interviews with female fans and female artists within the death metal scene to determine what appealed to them so much about death metal and to find out why they were so willing to trade off on their morals and beliefs and accepting sexism and derogatory comments and behaviour towards them. What was so appealing? What she found was that, there are a couple of different reasons which I've noted here, but really in context of the social exchange theory, her research showed that the cost and trade of conforming to the scene were worth it to the women who were part of it. It was so important to them to be part of that subculture. They were willing to accept sexism, derogatory behaviour and attitudes. Really interesting insight, and one that happens not only in the death metal scene, but I believe probably in the techno scene, grunge when it was around, rock, heavy rock. Certainly I don't think death metal would be the only music scene where this would be happening. Okay. So as Vassan alludes to in her paper, the death metal scene is really but a reflection of a wider social and cultural scenario whereby women continue to feel restricted by conventional ideologies surrounding their dress, attitudes and behaviours. So women are still feeling like they're restricted by the projected assumptions and expectations that society places on them in terms of them being a woman. So the death metal scene is really but a reflection of our society and is but one example of a subculture which promotes the compromise of women's beliefs and values as a sacrifice of their acceptance into that subculture. That concludes my discussion presentation. I really hope you found something valuable in it, and please contact me if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything further. Thank you.